Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Christine Spidell, and as a member of the tax faculty of the Villanova University Charles Widger School of Law, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this event centered on the experience and representation of women in the tax industry. It's an important conversation. We have made great strides in the last several decades in terms of the percentage of women who are studying tax. The percentage of women who are filling entry-level tax jobs is now nearly 50% in both law firms and accounting firms. But as you look higher up the experience level and the pay scale, you see that at the top levels of the industry, it's still predominantly male and predominantly white, frankly. So this is an important conversation, and thank you so much for being here to be part of it. Before I turn things over to our wonderful panel and moderator, Professor Joy Mullane, I'd like to say just a few words about the Graduate Tax Program and offer a few thank yous to those who helped make this event possible. So first, the Graduate Tax Program. We have some law students and members of the public here today, so just a few quick words. The Graduate Tax Program is designed to give working professionals the ability to expand their technical knowledge in a format that works for their lives and their schedules. So we offer 2 degrees and 3 certificates, and a very flexible schedule so people can fit that into their lives as working professionals. We also have a JD LLM program, which I know several students here are in, so welcome. Additionally, we wanted the Graduate Tax Program to really give students a return on their investment immediately. So as part of that strategy, we have a combination of full-time academic tax faculty and prominent tax practitioners who teach our courses. If you're here today and considering a degree in tax, I invite you to speak to the folks at the registration table. They also have the information about CLEs, CPE credit, if you need that. And they would be happy to hear your recommendations if there are folks you know who could benefit from a degree in tax. Okay, now the thank yous. A few words of thanks. This program is co-sponsored by the Villanova Graduate Tax Program and the Villanova Law Alumni Society, and I'd like to especially thank Kim Madden for her work in putting this event together. From the Graduate Tax Program, thank you to our faculty director, Stephen Olson, to our director, Dan Gerton, and to Catherine Coker for their work. And we greatly appreciate the efforts of the catering and events staff for setting this up for us and making this possible. And also thank you to Dean Mark Alexander for his support of the Graduate Tax Program. Last but certainly not least, I would like to recognize Professor Joy Mullane, who in 2019 was appointed faculty director of the Graduate Tax Program and led this program through the pandemic. She also convened the first event that we held here in 2019 discussing women in tax. And through her leadership, she has really forefronted conversations around equity, inclusion, and I really look forward to the continuation of those conversations today with our panelists and with you all beyond. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll check and see if this is working. All right, I'm going to be just a little repetitive and welcome you again. I am Joy Mullane, and I'm a member of the full-time tax faculty here. I'm very excited to be here tonight and so grateful to the Graduate Tax Program and the Alumni Association for bringing this event back this year. I thought it would be best to start by having this incredibly distinguished panel introduce themselves so you can get to know them a little bit, and then we'll kick this off with some questions and conversation, and we'll reserve a few minutes at the end for you to ask any questions that you might have of our panelists. So.
Yes, on. Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Gawker. I'm a tax partner with KPMG. That is my day job. I'm also the office managing partner of our Harrisburg office. I've been with KPMG for about 23 years now, spent a few years in industry prior to that. Specialize in corporate tax, and just I always like to add a little something personal. I have a bonus daughter, 3 beautiful grandchildren, and I'm happy to be here with you tonight.
Hi, is it on? Okay. Hi, I'm Erin Randolph Williams. I am a partner in our executive compensation group at Morgan Lewis. So executive compensation doesn't sound like tax, but it really is. So think, equity compensation, stock options, and non-qualified deferred compensation. So the things you read about in the paper, golden parachutes, that kind of thing, that's what I do. I've been at Morgan Lewis for 17 years, practicing attorney for 20 years, and I actually co-taught the executive compensation course here, not this past summer, but the summer before that. So I don't know if there's any former students here in the audience. I don't recognize anybody. But if you're interested in executive compensation, Villanova does offer a course.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Major. Until very recently, like Halloween actually, I was a partner at KPMG in the Washington National Tax Office in the International Tax Group. I went to law school, and out of law school, I kind of bumped around a number of different firms. I think I have probably practiced in every major format of firm, like a boutique, a New York law firm, the largest firm in the world, at least at the time that I graduated, and a couple of accounting firms. So I'm recently retired, I early retired, and I am looking at my next move. So if there's kind of a type of, I'm at a stage where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. I'm at that stage right now. I'm trying to figure out my next move. So if that resonates with anyone, please raise your hand and let me know.
Thanks. Mine should work too. I'm Christine Madison. I am a partner at Reed Smith, also a law firm in their state tax group. I have been with them for 12 years. They're right out of law school, so I've only been at the law firm the whole time. I think that's it for about me. My fun fact is I've got 2 little ones at home too that are keeping me busy and putting new challenges and managing work and life. So any advice or questions about that, I can help you there too. But.
Oh, yes?
Thank you for letting us know.
All right. Hopefully this is a little better. Okay. All right. Well, I'll start off by saying that from the academic side of things, we tend to talk a lot about tax exceptionalism. Is there something specifically special about tax law as opposed to other areas of law? And with that as background, I guess I would start with saying, do you think that there's anything particularly unique about women working in the tax field as opposed to other professional areas that might make it more challenging or less challenging to succeed and move up the ranks into leadership?
Well, I'll kick us off. I feel like, particularly with respect to women who are, who have lives, right? I mean, tax moves so fast. Every single day, there's a slate of journals with different kinds of developments. If you counted up all the developments in the United States alone, you'd probably get up to, like a dozen or 20 or 25. You start looking, like I do international tax, right? You start looking at what's going on in other countries as well. I mean, that's like 200, 250 things a day. And just because what we do is we kind of look at the developments and we mesh them all together and try to impose judgment, sometimes like that, when as we saw with tax reform, sometimes there's no real experience to lean on. I think that quickness of having to think on your feet, having to read something and assimilate it when you've got all kinds of other things going on, really tough. And I don't see that in a lot, like juvenile domestic relations law had, for example, has a tendency to stay, and it's the facts that change. Here it's the facts and the law that's changing.
Yeah, so I actually think that's interesting, right? But I think there's a benefit to it too. So it helped me, so in part of my career, when I had just started off, there was that, I do state tax. So Pennsylvania is my home state, there's a lot going on there. There was a complete overhaul of our tax code. It allowed me to become equal footing with some senior people because I could come in as sort of a newer, younger person and learn the law, from the beginning. Now, I thought that was great as a sort of junior person because I really could add a lot of value and became known by all of the partners as somebody to go to on, particular issues over this tax code change. So I think there's some benefits. Now, I didn't quite appreciate at the time that meant that it was going to continue to change, and at no point could I coast, which I thought that was something I was signing up for, but I'm not, so it's okay. So there's good and bad to that, right? But the other side is, so I do state tax and at a big law firm, right? So there's not really, and I do all tax controversy, I shouldn't say. So this is probably different than some of the accounting firm what people have going on in some respects, in that there's no real tax emergencies. So our shortest deadlines are 30 days, shorter sometimes if a client doesn't let you know what's going on ahead of time, but generally you can sort of plan a little bit more than some other groups at law firms that they're working around the clock on litigation and they're, can't control their life. In some respects, at least the state tax group has allowed me to sort of, it's very busy, but it does allow me to have some control over the time and planning in some respects.
So each one of you has risen to the ranks of partner and leadership roles in your firm. Were there any on sort of your way up from junior to where you are now? Were there sort of any notable barriers that you encountered? And then perhaps sort of words of advice, with the benefit of hindsight for navigating those barriers for those who might be more younger or mid-level?
Lots of barriers. I think one of the most notable is, at the time, the only woman in the room. And so getting, earning the respect of all of the men in the room. And sometimes we're still the only woman in the room. So I think that definitely was a barrier that you had to overcome, and you did that, but in several ways, working hard, kind of proving your worth. I think always felt like I had to prove my worth just that little bit more. And so it kind of leads me to the advice. I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help. I always felt like I had to prove myself or whatever, but, kind of come to learn through my career that everyone in the room was really there to support me and help me be successful. And I didn't appreciate that at the time.
I think, as a woman of color, it's hard for me to parse out what's because I'm a woman and what's because I'm a person of color. I actually personally identify as a person of color before I identify as a woman because I find more challenging in America today to be a person of color. So I think the barriers were in part internal, right? Do I belong here? Can I do this? Well, obviously I graduated from law school, got into good law firms, do good work. The answer is yes, but that's a lot of self-talk that some of you could probably identify with. And then I think really finding your sponsor, and that person doesn't have to look like you, but there's people who will believe in you even if you don't believe in yourself. So I think that sort of broke down any barriers that exist. I mean, they definitely do. But I'm also very fortunate enough to be at Morgan Lewis, which is run by a woman. Our chair is a woman, and it's the largest law firm run by a woman. And she makes an extremely concerted effort to elevate women. And so I have a unique situation for lots of reasons, but one of the better parts of my situation is that the top-down leadership really elevates women, and it's, you know, it's part of just kind of who we are.
So I do think that the imposter syndrome is a real thing. It's a huge thing. And I think, you know, my first law firm, Baker McKenzie, and the philosophy there was, we're going to throw you all in, and then you're going to sink or you're going to swim, right? And you're going to do 50% controversy and 50% planning. And then at around like the 5th or 6th year level, you're going to figure out whether you want, like, which side of the fence you want to be on, which I think is a great way to train, by the way. But I mean, not the whole sink or swim part of it, but I think the well-roundedness. But the problem, though, was that with the sink or swim, like, I was sinking, right? That whole transactional fluidity, I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but it was tossed around all the time. The very much like, oh, tax is a mystical thing. And in order to say, oh, well, how should we restructure this, you know, 15 country org chart? I know you do this and this and this and this, and you kind of pull it out of thin air. And I wasn't getting it. Like, how do you pull that out of thin air, right? And so, and with the kind of competitiveness and the imposter syndrome and the impossibility of saying, I don't know, because the entire system was, if you don't know, you're sinking, and then that's just kind of natural attrition, right? That's just what happens to you. At the time, I should say, this is 30 years ago. So, you know, for all I know, it's a lovely, lovely supportive place right now. But so sorry, sorry if you're at that firm. But I was probably very, I mean, I'm sure I was on the brink of being fired, sure of it. And I did not know what to do. And I could not reach out to other people. I mean, I just didn't have a network. And so finally, one of the partners got really kind of furious with me, and he's like, well, just write it down. What is the problem? Like, write it down. And I went, oh. Like, so this isn't a mystical thing. So I can make a list. And he's like, yeah, you know, there are only, what, like 7 or 8 ways to get an asset from point A to point B, right? Write your list and then bring it with you, and then write it on your hand or whatever you have to do, memorize it. And I went, oh, why didn't you say so? Like, why was this such a big mystery? But that, 100%, I was about to be fired. And that was a huge mental barrier that I then carried with me for a little while. But from then on, I had this coping mechanism of, you know, there is a way, and it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. I could, like, there's a more scientific way as opposed to a mystical way, and I just need to figure out what that is. So, I don't know, hopefully it didn't kill me, and hopefully it made me stronger, but I do think that, I mean, I see a lot of that in students and young professionals, and so hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it's been recognizing that there's going to be people who aren't going to be in your camp. There's going to be barriers. There's going to be people that aren't going to be your biggest advocate, and that's okay. You don't need everybody on your team. And so it's sort of finding whoever it is, whether it's one person, whether it's 2, whether they look like you or they don't, there's going to be somebody there that you're going to connect with that has the ability to sponsor you, right? You're going to have people sort of at all levels, ones that are your friends that you can talk to that are there for the moral support when you're in the trenches. There's ones who are there who can actually elevate you and take you along for the ride. And that's sort of, I think, it's sort of the barrier, but also sort of what gets you past it for me. And it was sort of this recognizing that I don't have to be liked by everybody, because I wasn't, I'm not, I probably never will be, and that's okay, contrary to my desire and personality trait. But and that some people might try and block you, but then it was learning to lean heavily on the people that were supporting me and have supported me in my career, and actually the ones who have made me partner, and continuing to lean on that. So my strength is not asking for help, and sort of looking past that and finding ways to really accept the help that was being offered to me by, quite frankly, my male partners. And I think that's sort of getting past.
Given what each of you said in terms of, in some ways, finding support, do Did you find in general that it happened more organically, or that you went, it seems a little bit of a mix, or you went and sought it out? Because, you know, you want this sort of natural relationship to form, but sometimes, you know, Kim, you're in a situation where you may feel uncomfortable asking. So any tips for trying to, you know, find your, like, your support person or persons? Although I'd be remiss as a professor if I didn't say, for those of you who might be students or going through the graduate tax program, to definitely maintain your friendships with your classmates, so you at least have immediately, right out the gate, you have some connections to people who can help support you as you're growing.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent in the idea of a sponsor, and some of you mentioned that, right? So you talk about like a mentor. Well, a sponsor and a mentor are very different things. And so finding that sponsor, the person who's going to carry your paper into the room with them and support you and help you get ahead is key. I mean, I think, and I always found it to be organic. You know, at our firm, we tell folks like, oh, identify a mentor, like on day one. Well, you don't know anybody, like that's just silly. You know, both the mentor and the sponsorship, I think, comes naturally, because it's going to be who do you work well with, who do you respect, who's going to carry that paper in the room. And, you know, finding the person that, I always looked at the sponsor role as my job is to make them look good and their job is to make me look good. So, and that's always developed naturally for me.
I agree. I think the key is to be yourself and to not necessarily look for people who look like you, because frankly, you might not have that much in common with that person. My first biggest sponsor is a white male, and my now current sponsor is a white woman, but I was just always myself, for better or worse. And that's who, I mean, we gravitated toward each other. So the firm definitely has, you know, like mentor programs, but that never really worked for me just because we weren't aligned, you know, personally, or even the type of work that I wanted to do. So I think I'm not sure how helpful it is to spend time looking for a sponsor, but to spend time being yourself, and then I think those relationships will come naturally.
I do think that you increase your chances the more you meet other people, not just within your group and your firm, but outside of your firm. I mean, the people that I went to my LLM program with, they're the people that every time I made the job change, I would call, because finally I was like, oh, I'm in this LLM program. I'm about to be fired, but you know, but maybe I should make some friends, right? And this was not a natural thing for me, like not at all. And I said, okay, well, where can I make some friends that I'm not competing with, right? Where can I get some mentors who don't have a vested interest in me working on all their stuff, or, you know, going into a certain track, or maybe not leaving them to try and go to the government, or what, like, you know, where should I find people? And you can find people at the ABA, you can find people at your local bar, the Alumni Association, the folks that you meet in your educational programs, you know, people in your neighborhood, like all of those people are pretty good mentors. And not all of them can be sponsors, because you probably need, a sponsor is different. A sponsor is someone who internally is going to champion you for promotion and things like that, so you need an internal one. But the more people you meet, the better off you're going to be. And the more people that you can call up and ask stupid questions and not get judged and not feel judged, which is then going to make you much more willing to call people and ask questions and learn, right? So look very, very broadly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you sort of need all of those people, right? You need the people that you can go to and ask the stupid questions. When I started state tax, I'd never even taken a state tax course. So like, I was stupid in state tax and had lots of questions that I had to go to somebody. I wasn't going to my sponsor for that. I was going to sort of the friends and people that I could trust and confidence to ask these questions to and sort of learn along the way. And then I sort of pay that back now. And I try and be that person for everyone that comes in, and I can answer their questions and make them feel comfortable and safe, whether I'm working with them or not. Quite frankly, a lot of people come to me with questions that I'm not on their case. But I'm not in a position necessarily to sponsor them yet. So I'm acting sort of as that mentor or informal, help, guide. And then I think the sponsor is important, and it is sort of the sponsor is this person who has the ability and the power to also take you with them. So it has to be someone that is in, an equity partner position, is in leadership, someone that actually can control sort of and be your advocate because they're in the room to advocate for you. And I think finding that it has been pretty organic for me. I think for some people it has to be a little bit more deliberate. You have to really work to sort of generate that relationship. And I think a lot of times right now, it depends there's not a lot of women in the sort of equity partnership role at the moment. It sort of depends. It's changing, I think, hopefully. We still lack a lot of diversity and color, so we've got that we've got to work on. But I think, so a lot of times your sponsor's not gonna look like you because they don't exist. And so I think it is important to sort of go beyond that. And I think it's important for everybody who, all of the men in here and all of the other people to remember that too, that you have to sort of look out for people who don't look like you because it might not be sort of this informal, natural thing, but they need your help too. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, that, picking up on that, I was going to say there's more women sort of entering the field than ever before and entering the tax programs, but we're not quite seeing the same numbers reach the leadership ranks, and even more so with, women of color. So I guess a different sort of question is, from your perspectives, where are sort of the traps, where are the gaps that are, sort of letting these women sort of fall by the wayside or not yet, reach the levels that they could be? And what could firms be thinking about to help with that? I'm thinking in particular as well that, Erin, you commented how much you feel like it's been really beneficial that your firm is led by a woman and what sort of a difference you feel that has made. So what are some of the ways and, the barriers to women reaching those levels, and what can be done to help support that?
Just statistically, I mean, it's very true, right? I just want to say, so there's a recent study that have come out that over the last 15 years, the inequity in law firms, so the number of women in law firms who are equity partners has gone up. I think it's 2% in 15 years. It's hovered around 20%. So the point of the study was it hasn't changed in 15 years, which is the problem. Meanwhile, in the past 15 years, there's been at least 50% of women going into law school or graduating from law school. We're now above 60%. So the question is, there's a lot of women, and we've always had in the last 15 years, a lot of women lawyers, but why are they not ending up at the higher levels? It's a really good question.
I have to say that I started law school in 1990, and the Dean of Admissions stood up at our convocation and said, for the first time ever, and that was a long time ago, right? And he said that for the first time ever, we've had greater than 50% female student population. Incoming student population. He said, so what this means is that 10 years from now, I expect to look across the roles of like new partners made, young partners made, and see like some kind of improvement because we're at 20%. And so it's not just 15 years with 2%, it's like a long time, like 30, I'm just gonna call it 30 years. Yeah. I mean,
One of the things that we do at Morgan Lewis, this is not a Morgan Lewis commercial, I'm sorry, but there are a few things that we do right. And one of them is that there are a lot of different roles for attorneys. So you can be an associate on partner track, not on partner track. You can be a senior attorney. You can be of counsel. And you're allowed to be in different roles at different times of your life. And many people work at reduced hours. So there's one partner in my group, she was an associate, then she was of counsel, and literally as soon as her kids left the house, she went up and made partner, and because she had more time to devote to it and more energy, and that's what she wanted to do. So I think from a management perspective to be very open to people having different roles depending on what's going on outside of their career is very helpful, because then you're not seeing people having to quit in order to stay home. It's, no, I can do this just at a reduced level or at a different level than, you know, I might have done a year ago, or I might do 10 years from now.
I think that's really important. And I've had conversations with young women, you know, young staff, maybe seniors, and they're like, well, but I want a family, or, but I want this. And they're dropping out before, you know, they're even married, right? So I think that the flexibility and really supporting them and getting them to, like, let's live in the moment. Let's get you to senior, let's get you married if that's what the goal is before you're dropping out and having, you know, a family. But I think the pandemic has actually been helpful with that regard, right? Because pre-pandemic expectation was we were in the office 5 days a week. Now we're, you know, expected to be in the office 3 days a week, or we can do a call from Zoom or Teams or whatever, and the expectation of seeing your face live is not there. So I think it's been super helpful from a flexibility and the ability to have other interests or have a family or those sorts of things.
I will say, and then we'll grab your question, but I will say that for the longest time, right, like part-time track was not a great deal. It was horrifying because it meant that you know, got paid part-time, but you still had to work full-time if you wanted to, you know, I mean, that was the traditional, again, graduated in 93, so long time ago. But we started to see a change when men started saying, wait, you know, I want to be involved in my kids. In my kids' lives, I want to coach. We had, at Miller and Chevalier, we had the first part-time partner was male because he wanted to be in a rock band and he needed to rehearse. Fantastic. I mean, at Deloitte, we had men who were, there was this one guy, and he was celebrated because we were all like, yes, it's not gonna be a stigma anymore. We're like, I'm not on mommy track, right? Because that was a problem, and at some firms, I think it still was, but this guy was an Olympian, right? I mean, he was training for like some kind of shooting event. Fantastic. Go. You go do that, and if you want to do a 40% schedule and you actually work 40% because you're training at the Olympic Center for the other 60, more power to you. Let's do it, right? So I think that's when the tide started to turn, because people, like I was like, nope, I'm going to work full-time because I'm going to work full-time anyway. Might as well get paid full-time, right? And might as well not carry that crazy thing. Now, there's a mental like health kind of issue with that, right? Because there's only so much you can do. You still only have 24 hours a day, you know, and you have like 13 different jobs too. But the second we started thinking about it, not as mommy track and not even as parenting track, but a quality of life track, everything got better, right? And I think, so for me, when I look around and because I've got 3 kids, like my youngest is in college, and they're looking at their firms and what should they be thinking about, I encourage both my girls and my boy to look at what other things you want to be doing. And I think that makes a huge difference. And they do make a decision firm to firm based on whether it is accepted across everybody to take some quality of life time.
Yeah, one of the things we've done, which I actually think is helpful for this, although it's really on the associate level, but we'll get to that in a minute, but is that you can take a reduced schedule. So it's easy to take a reduced schedule, and there's true up. So if you are at an 80% schedule and you're only required to work 80% of the hours, but you work 100%, because say you had a big case and you just can't get off of it, you just had to work. We can't always say no. You get paid 100%. So they true up your salary to 100%. Or if you are 80% and you work 90%, it gets trued up to 90%. So I think true up is really important, because sometimes you can't control your schedule and you can't control what you're asked to work on or what clients are asking you to work on. And so to your point, you don't want to get paid. A lot of people previously were working 80% or getting paid 80% and working 100%, and that's obviously not not good for anybody. So I think true ups in doing those kinds of things and those kinds of policies that firms are starting to pass does help. I think certainly the pandemic has helped. As someone who had kids later in life, and so I've got 2 little ones, I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I'm very thankful for the pandemic, for the silver lining of being able to work remote. It's not just people who have kids, there's just everyone, doesn't go into the office as much. When you do, people leave early. People used to never leave before 5 o'clock. Now everyone's out the door by 4:30. I think all of that and shift between men and women, everyone is doing it to get home to their families if they have them, or to get home to whatever they want to do with their life. I think that's been huge, because then there's also less attention if your kid's sick and I've got to stay home. People aren't sort of focused on the fact that I'm not in the office, because they have no idea why anyone's not in the office anymore. So I think that's been huge. I have no idea how women did it pre-pandemic, so I give everyone a lot of credit that you did, because I think that's a lot harder to sustain. So I think there's been some silver linings. I still think it's really hard, to the question of why we haven't made progress in sort of the equity partnership level and higher management at some places. I don't know. I think it'll take a lot. I still think that even with reduced schedules and things like that, there's still a lot of pressure. I think the sort of mentality of people in law firms is work hard, work more, make more, and it's sometimes hard to adjust from that. So I think I don't really know the answer. Trying to figure that out, but I don't know how we get there.
So flexible work schedules have been a really positive benefit. And with that, changes that stemming from the pandemic that allowed for more work from home have been really helpful. But at the same time, we have also talked about the importance of finding a sponsor and a mentor in these relationships. And so with more people working from home and more Zoom meetings, this is almost like a 2-part question. Do you have sort of suggestions for still finding that mentor and that sponsor if you're having less in-person, in-office, face-to-face time? And put you a little bit on the spot and say sort of how are you now at your levels and in your work environments sort of reaching out to those who are more junior in this sort of new environment to help support them on their journeys?
It's very challenging. I'm an in-office person, so and I don't think it's old school. It's just more like I get tired of myself if I'm just home by myself. I want to talk to other people and see other people. But what I've noticed with our junior associates, especially the ones that started in the pandemic, is they have no idea what they're missing. They think it's perfectly fine and they're learning at the pace they need to learn if they're home on their computers all day. That is not true. And so I think my first piece of advice would be show up. So, go to the office when you're supposed to go to the office, go to the events. I mean, we try to do things outside of the office so people can see each other. Show up. I understand that you may be very comfortable at home or you have to get childcare. A lot of us do. But I think if I don't see you, and again, correct me, I could be just very old school, you're not top of mind. I know this sounds like, 20, 30 years ago with FaceTime and stuff, and I guess I started 20 years ago, and so that was a big thing, but it really is true for me. I learned so much. When the pandemic came and we got sent home, I literally said to myself, I'm not kidding, I don't know how I'm gonna do my job because I won't be in, who's now my sponsor, so-and-so's office all day. How am I gonna do it? Because I was just back and forth, like well-tread path, and sitting in her office, asking question after question after question. So that's what I would say, show up.
I think you can force it too. So we I think it's been hard. We have the same problem. We can't, partners are coming in and associates are not. And I think it's just, we're used to coming in perhaps, we see the value. I'm not sure exactly the reasoning, but same problem. One thing we instituted during the pandemic is so every month it's already on my calendar, I have a call with a different associate every single month, and it's just a rotating list, and it's stayed on there. We still have to do it It's mandated by the head of our group. And so all of us have to have these rotating calls, and it sort of was this forced time to make sure we connected with everybody, even if we weren't in office. And this includes cross-office for us. So we cross-office. So this includes me trying to talk to our California associates, and sort of seeing what's going on. It gives them an opportunity to ask for work if they need it. It gives sort of this opportunity to learn about people. So I think that's important, whether it's from the partner reaching out and saying, hey, let's meet and just put routine meetings on, or it's someone junior reaching out and saying, hey, I haven't gotten to catch up. Can we either, meet in person and have a coffee, or have a Zoom call if the person doesn't come in? But I think sort of these forced interactions, if people aren't coming in, are important too.
And sorry, I mean, it's not just the learning part of it, particularly with a very, very large firm. We have a tendency, because you're remote, right, to manage by report as opposed to manage by person and interaction. And if you see a report, it's not just out of sight, out of mind. Like if you're trying to figure out what a person is doing, you're running some numbers. You're like looking at, how many billable hours? What is the utilization? What is the realization rate? How many hours do they spend doing, speeches or whatever, right? But you're looking at a report. And sometimes there are big gaps between those numbers that you just don't know how to fill. And if you have, however many hundred or however many thousand people, you're kind of forced to say, okay, so who is doing well and who is not doing well, looking at these black and white data bites. If you're in the office with someone, there's just a little bit more information as to how you're doing. Are you struggling? Are you not struggling? Do you need something? I mean, just that, the meaning of the body language, all of that. And if you want to be managed better, you're going to have to help us manage you better. You're going to just have to give us more information, right? And I think from our perspective, we are having to do okay, let's fill in, let's make sure, I had a bunch of people across the country because it's an accounting firm, that's what we do, right? And that's the nature of my practice. And I had people even in other countries, and then I had to put them on a bi-weekly call. So what did we learn this week? What did we not learn? Do we have to have a monthly call to go over XYZ? Do we have to be sure that different people are talking to other people? Who's got the joke of the week? We would, every single meeting, we had a rotation of who's gonna show us something funny, what is a funny video, a meme, or whatever, picture. Bring us a story to make us all laugh. Because all of that human interaction, I've changed firms a lot, right? I like to think that I went somewhere for the professional, I would stay or not for the personal. And what we're struggling with is we're struggling with that lack of personal connection that makes people stay. And when people bounce around, and when we bounce around, we can't get to know you, we can't teach you, there's fewer long-term development opportunities. So build that personal relationship, because I don't think I'm alone in terms of going somewhere for professional and staying for personal.
All right, well, I want to make sure we reserve a few minutes for the audience to ask any questions they may have. So my last question is going to be, do you have any last words of advice, words of wisdom that you want to share before we turn it over to the audience?
I think we alluded to a lot tonight about networking. I can't say how important networking is, because it's going to be professional networking, personal networking. Who do you call with the stupid question? Who do you call when you can't get home to pick up your son on time? So don't think of it just as professional, it's personal, and your network could be your next job, whatever. So I think that's so important.
I agree. And I think the best sort of networking is what you said. It's knowing your peers. So it's knowing your peers at school. It's knowing your peers at your firm. Those people will go to other places, and at a law firm, we're trying to get clients all the time. So if I have a friend that's now at a company who's not already a client or who works in a area where we don't already service in that area, I mean, that's already, a client sort of waiting to happen. So I would say know your peers. The piece of advice I wish I'd gotten earlier was just to stay in touch with more law school classmates, more college classmates, and that sort of organic way to grow your business if that's the kind of field you go into.
So my tax professor in law school gave me this piece of advice. He goes, Kim, your career, your bus, please drive it, right? He's like, too many people, and this is his words, and I think it's true. He goes, do not fall into the trap of allowing people to say, this is the track, this is the developmental thing, and you just have to follow it. Because there's that whole, good is the enemy of great. Absolutely. He goes, that happens all the time. And if you're given a track, that becomes a groove, then it becomes a rut. And he's like, and if you want to I mean, it's your career, right? I mean, who's going to love it and want it and nurture it more than you? So please be affirmative when you think, I need to reach this developmental goal. And sometimes, because the subtext of that is, sometimes it's going to require you to pull on your big girl pants, right? And he goes, and it's not, and it's going to be like, oh, no one wants to go and ask for a little bit more constructive criticism, right? I mean, that's not natural to us. But he's like, but you're not going to know how to grow unless you do that. If somebody says, oh, technical skill, you're okay. I mean, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is it the reading, the writing, the planning, the communication? And there are all kinds of stripes of all of that. Get more detail than people are willing to, just on a default basis give you. And that could be a little bit awkward, but you're going to drive your bus, right? Understand what you need to develop and move forward and go get it.
Yeah, I think, so I received this advice from my sponsor actually when I was a junior associate, and it was I was focused on, I need to be working more, I need to be doing this, sort of focused on just sort of work, right? And he said to me, hold up, remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? It's a long-term game. If you want to be in here long-term, you want to be equity partner, you want to stay here, it's long-term. You're here for many years, that means. So let's figure out what that path is, what that means. You don't have to burn out. You don't have to overwork yourself. What is it that works for you? And I think that's really important to remember. And I sort of always go back to that and say, right, it's a marathon. I've got a lot of working years ahead of me. I wish I didn't, but I have a lot of working years ahead of me. And so what's that path for me? What does that need to look like? How can I not burn out? How can I satisfy my soul? How can I make sure that I have a successful practice? How can I maintain relationships, right? And that's all long-term. It's, keeping in touch with your classmates. It's keeping in touch with your clients. It's doing good work. It's all of these things that are long-term. And sort of you have to maintain your own health, your own sort of balance to get there. And I sort of always go back to that when I feel like I'm either burning the candle at both ends or doing something that's sort of short-term, right? To remember that it's a long-term game. So that's for me.
Thank you. All right, do we have any? Yeah, do we have any questions? Yes.
I was just wondering, what is it about tax law specifically that kind of excited you and kept you going in it?
Well, for me, executive comp is varied. So Congress, I always say Congress is always passing new law. So we always have to learn something new. Or, to your point, I came in, I don't know if you guys heard of Section 409A, but it governs non-qualified deferred compensation plans. So I started the year that was introduced. I didn't have to unlearn anything. I started with that. And then, then there's a few years ago, now it's going to be repealed with the Tax Reform Act. It's like, oh, great, we'll have all kinds of more work, but there's always something new to learn. And so that's what attracted me to it. I lied a little bit, but that's the second thing that attracted me to it. The first thing was the people, for sure. It was just the people that were at the place where I went. I think that is key. You all agree you spend a lot of time with these people. And so it just so happened the exec comp group had the coolest people.
It's not something you hear often, tax and cool, but what I like about it, so I liked tax classes. Like I like having a code-based course. I like somewhere to start. I like that sort of analytical thinking and problem solving, and that sort of attracted me intellectually and academically to it. I think state and local tax is fun in that there's a lot going on. There's a lot sort of ever changing because states are trying to get new revenue all the time. They only know how to do that by taxing, so there's lots going on. It's one of the only places you can deal with constitutional law. So I do all tax litigation. So due process clause, commerce clause, equal protection, we've litigated cases around that, and that's fun to me. So I think tax law is interesting. I think that I like the sort of analytical problem solving code and then the sort of constitutional arguments that's out there. That's for me.
So I'm an accountant. So the other thing with tax is you have to understand the accounting to understand what to do with it for tax or how to treat it. So I think that's the other thing. In addition to it's always changing. I think Kim mentioned different law and different facts. So, working for a firm, you probably talk to 5 clients today or 10 clients today. So it's always something new and different.
And I have to say, like the same folks who were like, okay, it's your career, your bus, please drive it. It's full of aphorisms, right? Fantastic. But was also like, look, this professor was like, let's talk about what you want to be when you grow up, right? And he was like, so he goes, I'm going to ask you a bunch of, 1990, right? I'm going to ask you a bunch of really personal questions, and we're going to figure out what you should do with your life. I'm like, okay. I didn't know anything, right? Anything. And he goes, all right, so do you want to have kids? Do you think that, like, you might have to take care of your parents? Do you feel like you want to work full time? Do you want to blah, blah, blah? He's like, look, because when he asked me, what are you thinking about? I went, I could be like a securities, blah, 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 blah. He's like, oh, Kim. He goes, what? He goes, do you know what the life of those people is like? You're sitting at the printer, you don't do that anymore, but you're sitting at the printer all night long, you're correcting semicolons, or is it limited with the LTD period or non-LTD? He's like, come on. He goes, that's a job for like very energetic, read that young, and read that, very focused people who don't necessarily have an aging parent to go home and take care of. He's like, so what you need, and he goes, particularly with my personality, right, is he goes, you need to have something that is changing all the time so that somebody who has been practicing for 20 years and has been like, fairly aware is going to always be better than the most energetic, the most focused person who is willing to pull 3 all-nighters in a row who's 5 years out. He said, and so all you need is longevity. Like, pay attention and you will get more valuable year after year after year. And because he's like, Kim, you are going to need that market leverage, right? And so please pick something with market leverage. He said, it's going to come down to employee benefits, like straight up tax, or patent. And there's no way I was doing patent, right? So he's like, all right, pick between those two. And so, that has been true. That has been true for me. So it's something else to think about.
I know one of you said that, I'm sure everyone here feels the same way, that you're sometimes the only woman in the room. I feel like that most days. I'm also a woman and very emotional, and I have thoughts and feelings, and I struggle with keeping my cool during a meeting when I'm mansplained to or, told to do something and I already know what to do. How do you keep your cool? How do you kind of take the emotion out of it, especially as a woman when emotions are. I
sometimes it make people really uncomfortable, so they can be in your favor. No. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard. I think that I too can get emotional, right? Sometimes too, and I've been in places where, in meetings where your emotions come over you, and I just like, they're like, well, why aren't you saying anything? And I'm like, I actually, like, in my head, I'm like, I can't respond because I'm gonna cry. So like, I just have to remain silent, right? And it's like, so how do you deal with that, right? And so part of me has been, that's gotten better with time. That used to happen a lot more. And also, so my sort of way with that is when it would happen, and there was a female who I'd be in her office and I would let the tears come out, right? But usually it's with your male bosses and I'd be like, just hold it in, you know? And so when I'd go back to my office, I'd like have my moment and I'd regroup, and then I'd come back and be like, here's what I wanted to say. And I'd come back, and I'd always come back into their office and get my point across and be like, here's my defense, or here's whatever it is. Or I'd somehow come back and sort of, then I could feel a little bit sort of vindicated, if that makes sense, right? In group settings, we've all been mansplained, it happens. And sort of finding a way to do it is hard, to get around it. Oftentimes I've like found someone else who understands, whether it's even like a male partner, quite frankly, who has a like wife that he's really in tune with, that he's talked about it with. And he's like looked, you know, caught my eye, and he's like stood up for me, or he's, you know, after the fact, sometimes they don't even feel comfortable standing up. After the fact, we've talked about it, and at least I feel seen, right? So I don't know. So I think there's sort of, it's a work in progress in that, but I don't know if other people have.
I'd say find an ally in the room too. Is there another, either a man who kind of gets it, right? Because not everyone does, or if there's another woman, so that when, you know, when you're in that position, or you're being, you know, talked down to, or whatever's happening, that perhaps there's someone there to support you and help. And it's not.
It's difficult when you're in industry because a lot of the time I'm a client and a lot of my relationships have been built with partners, but they're also expecting all the other people in the room. So it's not always easy to find that ally, especially in industry.
If there's a Deloitte partner making you cry, we got a problem. We need that Deloitte partner coming to your aid then.
And I will say, like, I feel like we're sisters, because like I have had that issue as well, and it had come up during my evaluations, which is probably one of the reasons why, like, my professors were like, okay, look, with your personality, like, you probably need some market leverage, like, so start building that, right? And it got to the point where I finally said, okay, look, you know, things are happening and I don't know what to say, but sometimes, like, there's nothing that I could possibly say. And this, I think we're at an impasse where I think I'm gonna have to leave. And to their credit, my firm was like, let's hire you an executive coach. And I was, first of all, like, no, like, I don't want to do that. And I really did not want to do that. And not all firms have the resources to do that. I will tell you that it helped enormously, because we would meet on a monthly basis on the phone for an hour, and she'd be like, all right, and I had a woman, and not all of them are, but she said, okay, so describe to me, you know, what you were thinking and how pissed off you were, like bent, let's hear it. And then she'd say, all right, so what do you wish you had said? Because sometimes, you know, 2 days later, you're like, oh, the perfect thing would have been this, right? So, and we would kind of role play on the phone, and then, you know, at some point the funding ran out for that, and she said, okay, go find your network and then role play with them. And it took a year, but I could not do it alone. There was no way I was going to get that. I mean, and I was just getting worse, because I was just getting angrier and angrier. And it, you know, it helped a lot. And then she finally said, okay, like the very last thing, she goes, you know what? When you're running your own group, nobody's going to be mansplaining to you. So you go run your own group. And we had a little talk about how to do that, how to maneuver, and then I did. And it's one of those things that over the course of time, you keep your development up, people are going to, it is a problem that starts going away. That's the good news, right? But, you know, there are plenty of us out there. Like, you can call me anytime and start like yell, and you can vent, and there are ways to do it because you do not have to do it alone. I was not able to do it alone.
We're going to be wrapping this up soon. Just going to take another, no, I was going to say, I'm going to just get another question or two. Just giving you a heads up before we turn this over to our reception, at which point I want to say our panelists are still going to be here. And so for any outstanding questions, please feel free to come up and talk to anybody. So I saw a hand here and I saw a hand back there. So we'll take you and then you'll be the last before we move on. Yes.
I was just wondering if there was some type of expectation or thought that you had when you first started that over time you were surprised. Like something that you, if you could go back and tell yourself when you were in law school or when you were getting your education, that you'd be very surprised based on the expectation you had in the tax field, specifically the legal field, that just surprised you, defied expectations, was disheartening, was encouraging, something that really just went against what you thought.
Like, I always had that thought in my head that kind of the mystical thing of this is a guild and I'm going to be a quality person. Everyone's going to recognize my development. And then one day they'll like march to my office and be like, hey, we're going to make you partner. And everything, you know, champagne popping, whatever, right? I now understand that it takes, at least in my groups, like it took 3 years to make a partner, right? 3 years to build the business case, to build the champions, to build the, you know, support, to build the recommendations, to build the clients going, yeah, has to happen, right? And I had a very romanticized view, obviously, of what it was going to take, and now I have a much more scientific view and as to what it would take. And I kind of wish that most people had like a little bit better view, because then the networking and the sponsorship and stuff, that starts making a little bit more sense. But we started kind of tracking it out, like, okay, well, let's plot it. I mean, how horrifying and unromantic is that, right? Let's plot it. But if you did, you would then say, oh, by this, you know, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And having that path is very helpful.
One of the things, it sounds silly to me now even, is that this is a business. So as much as I want to hang out with my friends and learn about tax law, it's really about the bottom line. And I'm sort of, it's not my personality. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not business-minded. I never will be. I've sort of given up on that. But that is the reality. And so that's what I mean by, you know, get to know your peers, all of that. And that's, I mean, to me, that would be the fun stuff if I had really thought long-term. But it really comes down to the bottom line a lot of time. I mean, there's, you know, all this talk about mental health. I mean, definitely, I think organizations are taking that seriously. I don't mean to belittle that. But it is really, at the end of the day, how much money are you saving us? Or if you're at like a law firm, because we're the business generators, how much money are you bringing in? And that still, it shouldn't, but it still sort of hits me upside the head every once in a while.
There's a program for that too. I mean, we could like, that's a different, but.
I said I gave up.
But yeah, we could, because there's, I mean, I'm the big one where I'm like, let's plot this out. Let's figure this out, right? I mean, the guy who was like, can you write a list? Like, but I ran business development for one of my firms, and the top line revenue of that firm was like 65 million. We had no business development budget. So we did a lot of studying as to behaviorally what made sense. I think all the big firms like KPMG had this big, like, you know, how to sell for people who didn't have that. But there is there's this kind of a quasi-scientific way to do it, and we can walk you through it. It's like, it's possible.
So I'll call you later.
Yep. You can call me anytime.
Right. And then, yes.
Have any of the panel members run into a situation where a client does not want a female attorney?
I have had a situation where a client turned to a former commissioner of the IRS and said, I never thought that I would be sitting across the table from a woman, a young woman wearing a ponytail. And he was so angry at me. Like, I mean, everybody was just furious. Like, why are you wearing a ponytail? So note that I 90% of the time have a ponytail or a messy bun because I just went, guess what? You know, but yes, I do think that's still, and whereas I think that people are not as explicit, there are some, there's still like a preference, right? I mean, it's not as stark as that, but there's still a preference.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had someone say they would rather work with a man, but I definitely have had clients who will defer to the man in the room, right? Like, they're not gonna, he's got to reiterate what I said for it to actually be heard. Absolutely.
I think I have a point I thought we would get across, but I'll make it here, is that clients are now demanding diverse teams. So it's sort of an asset now to be a woman. Definitely an asset to be a woman of color. Now you have to watch it because there's been many times where I've just been put up on the Zoom and I don't actually get the work. So that you have to be very mindful of. But I think because, like I said, it's a business and it's about the bottom line. And if clients want to give work to diverse teams and insist on it, which many of the larger companies do, then, they want a woman on the team.
But they don't want a woman who's going to say, give the 80% answer, right? I mean, 80%, that's a low B, right? The vast majority of advisors say the exact same thing as everybody else. Number one, because it's safe, and number two, because tax is hard. And so like the same 80% is known, and they tread and tread and tread around the same 80%. And then, but if, for me, like I try to mentor the women who work for me, like remember that the thing that's gonna get you that A is the 10 to 20% that no one else is saying. So stop thinking about getting that 80% perfect and start thinking about what is not being said. And there's a list. And you can run down the list and you can say, oh, well, what in this list, might you make a comment that is out of the ordinary? And that way, if you train other people to think of you as not doing that 80%, not accepting the default settings on things, not seeing the exact same thing, then they'll start listening more carefully to what you say, right? So it is an exercise in thinking outside the box a little bit, which everybody says that they want to do, but it's really hard to teach. But I think if you find, particularly, you're right, it's an asset to be a woman. It's a real asset to be a woman who can sell business, and that extra 10 to 20%, that's the winner.
And I will say, so I haven't had the experience where where I have had a client not want to work with women. I have done it for myself where I've gone out on a client pitch and it's a contact that I was connected with, and the two client contacts were white males, and I was like, and older. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm really gonna get this, like should I bring somebody else too? And I did. I chose to bring a more senior white male for some gray hair in the room to sort of help me out. Now, granted, it was someone who was my sponsor at work who came along sort of for my ride, right? He gave me all of the credit. He didn't take any of the credit. He helped me out. He sold me. And sort of so that was my I could bring that kind of a person along. Not everyone has that benefit. And hopefully no one needs that going forward. But, and the other side of it is most of my practice has been built around female clients. And that was sort of my pitch when I went up as well. And one of the things that I think is the benefits and things that's out there in the tax world is a lot of in-house. There's a lot of women in-house in tax. And there's a lot, out there. So at conferences I go to that are 600 people, more than half are women industry. And there's sort of a whole group there and a whole pool of clients that are females that also want to work with women too and can help build you up. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for women and to find each other sort of in this field to help bring each other along.
And on that note, I want to invite you all to continue having these conversations amongst yourselves and with our panelists at the reception. But before I dismiss us to that, I do want to take a moment just to thank our panelists so much for sharing your time, your thoughts, your wisdom. Thank you.